Hey everyone, this is Joe Zija, and you're listening to the Kasanova podcast.
Kasanova, host of Hawaii's #1 podcast for tech, entertainment, gaming, and more, the Kasanova podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very, very special guest, good friend of the show, the one, the only, Charlie. Charlie is an amazing journalist. He's worked with so many from CNN, NPR, IGN, so many more. But I'm going to shut up because this is not my time to talk. This is Charlie's time to talk. This is Charlie's show. Charlie, go ahead. Floor is yours.
What's up, y'all? As Mekel said, I am a journalist. I write about food, booze, video games for a ton of different publications. As you mentioned, again, I've written for IGN, CNN, NPR. I also do a lot of stuff for Paste Magazine, Upload VR, Android Central, and a few others. You know, they're kind of always coming and going. I actually just had my first byline with PC Games End today, covering Ultros, which just came out or comes out this week. I forget the exact date on that, but yeah, lots of different places. Week. Yeah. Have you played the demo for that game at all?
Yeah, I actually have a review copy. Jenny sent it over to me, and I was like, "Oh man, this is pretty cool." Yeah. But like, there's so much, and it is not to interrupt you, but there's so much that just has released within this year, and only 2 months in. I'm like, we don't need another 2023.
No, dude, like, tell me about it. Like, especially, there was that 1 week where it just felt like 4 or 5 major games were coming out. Like, it was Yakuza, Tekken, and Prince of Persia all came out in the same week, which is nuts. Yep. And then I think this coming week, there's a bunch of new stuff coming out too. And then you have Rebirth at the end of the month, and it's just like, the hits keep coming, man. And you know, if we get the rumored Nintendo Direct that's supposedly happening between now and like sometime in March, we'll probably get a bunch more dates announced. And the seems like we're heading towards another 2023, which is kind of insane to think about.
Oh my god, it's crazy when you like. For those who you know, if you're just a viewer or listener and you don't understand the behind the scenes of how this stuff works, like. As journalists, typically, depending on the outlet, depending on the journalist, sometimes you'll get a game weeks ahead of time, month, or 2 months ahead of time. Sometimes you get it literally hours before it launches, the day of, or after launch. And some of these games are long, man, like 40, 50, 60. Like, how do we have Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and then Persona 3, and then we're getting freaking Rebirth? Like, what?
Dude, I forgot about Persona. I gotta jump on Persona too. Yeah, it is insane. And it's like, I mean, looking at it from a journalistic, like, press reviewing perspective, it's nice that a lot of times we're able to get these games, especially the long ones, like early. Like, I know a lot of people who had copies of Persona 3 with more than enough time to play through the whole game and stuff like that. And same with Yakuza, and same with a few others. But it's really it really, like you said, it does kind of depend on from outlet to outlet and creator to creator. Like, there are times where something will be coming out and you're covering it and you just like, you don't get access to it until the last minute. And then you see other people who, you know, have had it for a while publish stuff. And it's like, that's part of the game, but like, it can be difficult sometimes.
It definitely can. And I know you and I were kind of talking about this offline. I'm not going to go fully into what we were talking about, but like, the gist of it is like how, you know, the game is never really like this game of journalism and content creation. Nothing's guaranteed. Like, no matter how much you've covered for a company, no matter what you've done, what outlet, publication, whatever, you're not guaranteed anything. And sometimes it can suck. And you're like, oh, wow, they got that. How come I didn't get this? I've done, you know. But, you know, it's just part of the game. Like, what's out right now? Final Fantasy VII Rebirth codes, first and second round codes have already gone out. I'm over here like, can I get some love? That's the biggest game. That is the biggest game of the year, right?
It's got to be. I mean, like, I can't think of anything else. Unless, like, the Switch 2 comes out and there's like a new Mario game, or if there's some kind of surprise thing like that. I mean, I would say, yeah, it's probably Rebirth, a potential 3D Mario, Indiana Jones, maybe. If I'm not really sure if it's quite at the same level as Rebirth, but I'm personally more into it than Rebirth, although I do love Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm just a big Indiana Jones fan.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else there would even be. I feel like a lot of the like really big stuff that's on the horizon. Metaphor Ray Fantasio, that's coming out this year, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be as big as Final Fantasy, but that's another big boy.
Yeah. Like, even from like thinking about PlayStation first party, like, I don't know what else they're really dropping that's major this year. I mean, Helldivers 2 came out. I love it. I know there's a lot of pay to win controversy talk about that title, but yeah, I don't think anyone else outside of Square Enix is really in if we do get Indiana Jones and the game from Atlas, I don't really know what else major is coming out, because if it's like 2023 had a major game every single week or multiple per week from January to December. It didn't let up.
And like so far it's felt like that. But yeah, I feel like once we get out of March, things really drop off. And again, that's why we have direct state of plays, presentations, whatever happening this time of year. Like that's why the February Nintendo Direct exists, is so that you can kind of like fill out the rest of the year, or at least up until June, July.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
Yeah, so I'm definitely the same camp as you. Is like there isn't as much right now, but I have a feeling in like 2 or 3 weeks we'll have a different tune. But like look at March. March is kind of stacked too. You have Rise of Ronin and Princess Peach are coming out on the same day. I know there are 1 or 2 other like bigger AAA things happening that month as well that are escaping me at the moment. But yeah, it's like I get the vibe that things are going to kind of continue at this sort of insane pace.
Definitely. So one of the things I also want to bring up is man, it's been a long time since we actually got to talk like in a way face to face. It's been 8 or 9 months.
Yeah, it feels like it was like yesterday, but it also feels like it's been years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say like, yeah, we met at the Final Fantasy 16 event in LA, and it was I think the presentation of like with the statues and everything that it had, the orchestra and everything, well, not orchestra, but the way they were playing the music, just it felt so epic, right? So, but it's just wild that was the event we met at. That was actually the first Square Enix event I ever got invited to.
Same.
And is absolutely crazy. Now, I want to know, what is your perspective on like, because I've seen the video that Square Enix put out for that like last year. They were saying, "Oh, it made it seem like it was super packed the entire time." In my opinion, because I think you were there the entire time too. It felt like it was packed at the beginning and it started like trickling out.
I left kind of earlier on, but like I think I trickled out when a lot of the other people trickled out from that event. But it was like kind of nuts when we first got there. I mean, you and I had like special access, but like I remember like you and I were like looking at that line like, oh man, that's gonna be a while. And it was like a little rainy too, and the line was outside. It was like a whole thing. And I think you and I both had the same intuition to be like, yo, we were invited. How do we find a different way to get into this? Because it was hot and humid in LA that day, and like you said, it was really packed at the beginning. Like I know for a fact I did not spend as much time in like the presentation area as I'd wanted to, because it was so packed in there. I mean, it was like they basically took like a soundstage, I think, or like something that looked like a soundstage and turned it into an event space, but it was cheek to jowl at the very beginning of that event. So I was just spending my whole time outside, because I was like. You caught me fresh off of the like craziness that was Summer Game Fest. Like that was right after I did all the demos and everything for all the coverage that I was doing. So I was already like on day 4 of this like not E3 fake E3 thing that was happening, and I was ready to sit down at a table and have a drink and just hang out. So that's pretty much exactly what I did. I was just sitting there on the picnic benches, talking to some of my friends who were also at the event, and just like watching it on the big screen that they had outside. Because really, being in there was way too much for me after a few days of already doing that.
Did you get to play 16 at the event? I didn't get to play at all.
No, those lines were really long. And honestly, again, I was trying to like do more networking stuff than I was like play the game, because to be honest, I still haven't gotten to play it yet. I have it now, but I haven't had a chance to actually give it a shot. But I'm very excited to check it out.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, like when it comes to these events, for those of you who are listening or watching, you have to understand when you go to events like that, yeah, it's cool that we do, or, you know, we get to experience a game or see the press kits and all this other stuff. But really, these events are for marketing. And you kind of want to, if you're either a content creator or if you're a journalist, you want to network, because you never know who you're going to meet. Like, we were there, I think it was me, you, Louise, Kevin Kinson, we were all kind of hanging out for a bit, and then we saw other people come in, content creators like Unruly, what's the other guy, Maximilian Dude, and a bunch of other people. There's a lot of people that were at that event. So, you know, that's the best time to network, especially if you're newer to the scene and nobody really knows you. Start networking, get your name. If you got business cards, definitely bring those too. So
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my experience. Like, I'd been to the 2 previous Game Awards post, like since the pandemic started, but I'd never really been to an event like Summer Game Fest aside from PAX last year. So this was my first like E3 style thing, where it was a lot of the bigger names in YouTube and Twitch streaming and journalism were all there. So it was my first time meeting a lot of these people. And so, yeah, it was, as you said, a great opportunity to get FaceTime with people I wouldn't normally be able to, because there aren't honestly a lot of people who do what I do in Chicago. Like, I'm that's where I'm based. I live in Chicago currently, but like most of the people who work in journalism, and especially games journalism, live in California or New York or somewhere on the coasts, basically. And so I don't get as much access aside from my friends that I already know that live here and kind of do what I do. So yeah, and I'm sure that's something that you can relate to, where it's like you don't always get an opportunity to get FaceTime with people, which is so much more important than talking over the internet, which is important. Like, a follow is good. That's a good intro with someone, but having that face-to-face connection is really, really, really important, I feel.
Oh, guaranteed. Like, especially being out here in Hawaii, like, I can't, like, we have a lot of journalists out here, but anyone who's really covering tech and gaming, that's not really a thing out here. And, you know, from the companies I've worked with and talked to, I've always asked, like, hey, like, are there other creators here in Hawaii or journalists in Hawaii that you work with? And often I'm met with like, no, it's either you or, you know, maybe your wife or, you know, a few creators here and there, but it's not. And I think that's also a cultural thing. Here in Hawaii, a lot of us, you know, Hawaiians and locals are not that big into tech and gaming, because it's more, trying to say this in the nicest way possible. coming from an island, it's quite country. I guess that's the best way I could put it. So there's not a lot of us out here that are doing that. So, you know, when we get the opportunity to go to these events, it's surreal. You know, if there's also a bit of pressure, because you're like, oh, I'm kind of like the Hawaii representative here. If I screw up, make all of us look bad. But I wish that would change, especially for here. And I've done stuff where, like, with the colleges out here, I do mentoring and I do classes on journalism and content creating. And a lot of the younger people here, they want to get into it, but there's also the pushback because it's not culturally accepted. It's like, oh, that's nerd stuff. And I'm like, that mentality is like 20 years out of date at this point, but
yeah,
it is what it is. Like, hopefully we can get more Hawaiian journalists and content creators that want to get into this field, because right now this is a perfect time to get into it, because there's no competition out here. So come on, let's step up the game. But I definitely want to talk about you, man. Like your journey, how you got
Mhm.
started, like what was your interest, and where you see it going. So you can take as long as you want. We gonna hop in the DeLorean, go back in the past, and
All right.
hey, floor is yours.
So yeah, so it all started honestly for most of my life until I started writing. I hated it. I
Same.
was not into it in the slightest, and I really do think it kind of points to some like flaws in our educational system at large, where like I didn't
Yeah.
feel encouraged to write because I was always writing about things that I wasn't choosing. And the
Hmm.
first time I wrote about something where I was really taking a deep analysis of it about a work that I cared, it was an essay for an English class about Pride and Prejudice.
Hmm.
And my teacher for that class was like, "Hey, you're really good at this. Like, this is one of the best things I've read as a teacher." All this stuff about like the craft of what I was doing and appreciating, which is something that I'd never been encouraged to do. And around that same
Hmm.
time, we were reading the Roger Ebert review of Star Wars, which up to that point, I mean, I knew that there were people that were critics. Like I knew about dining critics and movie critics and stuff like that, but I never thought about it critically. I wasn't like, oh, people are reviewing things for their job. They are just
Hmm.
this is just a thing that they do. And so I was kind of exposed to those two things at the same time. And it was also during the lead up to the reveal and subsequent release of the Switch. And that whole rumor cycle around it was so electrifying, especially to me, because I was like super hardcore Nintendo fanboy. I was reading all the rumors. I was like on YouTube every day watching like the people who were reporting on things that as rumors that were definitely not viable rumors, just because I was like so addicted to that feeling of being in the know and having some kind of like potential look at even just what people are saying, because I'm so interested in that kind of thing. And then I would
Yeah.
report it to my friends at the lunch table. And so those three things kind of coalesce together at the same time. And I realized, oh, this is something that I enjoy doing, that I'm capable of and good at, that I'm passionate about, that I could see myself doing. And so that's kind of how I started wanting to do it. And from there, I was doing YouTube. You know, first it started out as me just doing like amiibo unboxings, which are not fun to watch for me today. I cannot stand going back and watching that old content, because truly it is like 14-year-old Charlie just not knowing how to be on camera or how to edit anything, and just kind of like not even how to frame a shot. And the audio quality is bad. So I was just like just doing it. I was just doing the damn thing. And then my senior year, I started streaming a bunch, and that lasted kind of into college. And that was kind of my entryway into the games journalism sphere, where
Hmm.
I worked for a very shortly lived website called Gamer Professionals, and they had a YouTube channel that I managed. So I was
I
doing like
remember that. Wow.
weekly new. Wait, you know Gamer Professionals?
I remember that. Yes,
No way.
I
That's
do.
wild.
Dude,
They
I
because
was
I
in
was
the weeds of it back in the day
yeah,
when it came to game coverage.
for real.
I was like, yo, I gotta watch all this stuff because it was the Wild West back then
Yeah,
before it
man.
got more like consolidated into what it is now. But I'm gonna
Mhm.
shut up. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. You're right. It absolutely was like the Wild West, especially like when you're like for me, and I'm assuming that's probably around when you were like still early on, right? It's like 2015, 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
Like that being in the early days of this kind of thing, it's like you have to know every single person who is doing the kind of thing that you want to do or are doing, because that
Yep.
is your best chance of knowing people, finding opportunities, that kind of stuff. And that's really how I got in, honestly, is I from Gamer Professionals, I after that site shut down, it was right around when the pandemic started, so I was locked at home. You know, I was living
Hmm.
back with my parents from college, and I I was in like this Zoom networking thing with a couple other journalists that I just like heard about from Cam Hawkins, who I found through the Spawn on Me episode, A Lesson in Blackness, which I feel like is like required reading at the time for wanting to be in games media and like caring about media literacy in a way that represents more than just, you know, the people at the front of the industry, largely white men.
Hmm.
And that kind of exposed me to Cam and like his kind of group of the group of fruit journalists that he runs with, Jesse Patel, some of the other folks in that squad. And yeah, so I was in a networking call with him and a few other like people, because it was like, again, super early days of the pandemic, so a lot of people were just kind of like looking to like get some FaceTime. People weren't going to PAX East, E3 wasn't happening, all this stuff. So I went to this event, and he happened to work at DualShockers at the time, and I reached out and I was like, hey, I want to work for DualShockers. Is there any way that I could do that? And he kind of pointed me in the right direction, which eventually led to me getting a job there, which then led to Twinfinite and Android Central and Pace Magazine, and it's just kept rolling and rolling and rolling since then. And at first it started out, I was like a lot of people, just trying to get anything made, not even get paid, but just like have articles published. And eventually I started making money from it, and now it's like almost enough to where I can sustain myself solely from writing, which is really cool. And not in very long either. That was in 2020 when I really got my start in the space, and only about 3.5-4 years later, here I am, and I'm doing pretty well for myself, all things considered. I mean, it's not the easiest landscape of media to work in right now. There are layoffs and budget cuts left and right, so it's I'm very proud of myself for what I've been able to accomplish. And honestly, like I wouldn't be here without a lot of help and a lot of patience from people who want me to succeed and who have my back.
Yeah, like, and that's something, the topic of sustainability is one that I like to dive into a lot when it comes to like content creating and journalism, because a lot of people think, oh, okay, I uploaded a video on YouTube or I wrote an article and I'm gonna start raking in the money. It's like, no, there's it's not like that at all. I wish if it was, we'd be rolling in millions right now, but it can often be a thankless field. But yeah, trying to being able to make a living off of it, or be able to live off of writing and journalism as a whole, is very difficult to do. And the fact that you were able to successfully do it, that is very commendable. Hats off to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's whenever someone's like, oh, that sounds really fun, or it sounds really cool, I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's fun when I get paid, and when I don't, it's frustrating. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's really introduced me to a lot of awesome people. Like, I wouldn't have met you without, going to Summer Game Fest and stuff like that. And so many of my like closest friends now are people I've met through this. And even just at that level, it's been very fulfilling. But yeah, I agree. It is often like glamorized, especially anything with content creation, where you see, especially if you're talking to somebody who isn't really involved in the space, and they see all these, YouTubers or vloggers making millions on merchandising, or starting coffee blends, or like having online shops and things like that. And it's like, that's really cool and good for them for the most part. But like, that is not the reality of it. It is very like sink or swim for a lot of people in this space.
Yeah, and it gets to a point where, again, for those of y'all who haven't peeked behind the veil of what we do, if you don't work, you don't eat. There's really, I would say, almost no off period for us. I mean, maybe sometimes we get a little bit of a break if the release cycles start to dive down, but because of the nature of how people consume, content via articles or videos or podcasts, we have to constantly be ready to just go straight to working. We don't get, in comparison to a lot of people who work 9 to 5s or work retail or whatever, like when you're off, for the most part, you're off. But for us, like, no, something drops, we either got to write an article about it, do a video, make some type of social media post, and it can be just a bit of a rabbit hole. You just start going down, and it can be tiring, but that's just how it is. I've had people, I want to say over the last week, I've had a lot of people out here. They're like, man, what you do, you make it look so easy. You get all these opportunities. I see you constantly posting, you got this game, you got this device, you got this, and this. And like, you must be rolling in money. I'm like, no, not really.
a lot of
I
times
mean,
that thing that you get is the only thing that you get, right? It's like
that's
a
all
free
you
game is all you're getting paid for. It's payment. You know, it's like that is usually, and that's how it is in content creation and journalism in a lot of places, especially like early. There are a lot of sites that are kind of designed to take advantage of people who don't know that whole thing, and they expect you to work extreme hours and put in way too much work for either no money or very little money with the offer of a free code or a free device or a free accessory for a VR headset or something.
I've actually had I won't say their name, I'll tell you offline, but a prominent outlet has actually, that's fairly new within the last year or two. I've helped them before because they didn't know who to go to, like contacts, connections, which we can dive into that in a bit. But I helped them out. They blew up with certain devices, and they want me to write for them, but they want all the attention that comes from it, and my payment is free codes. I'm like, I don't have a problem getting codes. If I'm gonna write for
Hell
somebody, I
no.
want to
Yeah,
get
what?
paid. I want to get paid. Yes.
Jeez.
It's quite interesting, but yeah, do you mind diving more into that, like that whole process, for the audience, so they can get a bit of an understanding
Yeah.
on it?
What kind of things are you most interested in hearing about?
Um, I guess from the perspective, like working for various publications, like is it always like for you, is it like, here's the pay, do they pay you up front, midway through, or after, or is it just payment via code? Like, I guess a rough estimation of it. You don't have to do
So
specifics.
I would say I don't work for free anymore. For
Mhm.
a very long time, I would be open to doing a review if I got a review code, because honestly, like having a review published at a big site like Dual Shockers didn't really pay me, and I've been vocal about this, and they've shifted management a couple times, so this is not
Mhm.
in any way resemblant of what Dual Shockers does nowadays. I'm speaking strictly from my experience under old management, and I hold no ill will. Like I was very much like cognizant that I would not be paid going into this. But when I started the gig over there, I didn't get paid for anything. Technically I
Mhm.
got paid $5 a month, but it was like it was so I could mark something as a
What?
paid. Yeah, it was so I could mark something as a paid internship for a certain like school credit thing. That's literally the only reason why. Like I that was it was them helping me out, kind of, because it was
Okay.
again for school credit. But yeah, like I wasn't really making money there, and I didn't get paid for any of the reviews that I did. But again, like I was so early on that having that kind of portfolio was very helpful. But then kind of moving forward, I started Android Central, and like honestly, once I got to Android Central and Paste, I stopped working for free completely, because I knew at the very least I could get paid like $100 for a review from Paste, or 75 pounds a review from Nintendo Life or something like that.
Mhm.
And so ultimately, it really boils down to how how much you value yourself, almost to a certain point, where it's like, and obviously this isn't to say that that's the only factor, but like you need to be able to like look at the body of your work and be like, I deserve better, I deserve to be paid for this stuff. And like now I would say most reviews that I write, I get paid. I mean, it depends on where I write for, but like I don't get paid less than $100 for a review for the most part. There's one site that pays less than $100, but it's usually a site that does reviews for games that I wouldn't otherwise be playing. So I get
Mhm.
the code for free, and it's like, again, it factors into the job itself, and usually those are things that I wouldn't be able to cover anywhere else. So it's just kind of at additional money. But like, yeah, I sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, to answer the original question, generally speaking, nowadays, I think the best way to not work for free is firstly understand your self worth, and secondly, just be savvy about who you're talking to, who you're pitching, and be willing to just be told no a bunch of times. Because I mean, honestly, like when I've written reviews for CNN, I didn't get those reviews because I was like first or because I know the editor, but because I was really annoying. I emailed that guy like 5 or 6 times before I heard confirmation about being able to write one of these reviews, and then I ended up reviewing Mario Wonder last year for them, and it's like, that's crazy. That's the first time I ever got an early version of a Nintendo game, which, if Mekel, I'm sure you know a little bit about that, where it's like they do not give away early codes for their games. They do not fuck around with it at all.
No,
they like even more than other people. And a lot of the big players are very careful. Like Square Enix is another one where they're like, with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I haven't seen the embargo. I know nothing, but I can almost guarantee you that the conditions of the review embargo are very, very strict. And they're like, you can't talk about any of these things. You can't talk about anything past this chapter. You can't talk about this character. You can't talk about this mechanic, because that's part of it. And like, yeah, getting a code early from some of those guys kind of is like kind of weird as it sounds. It is validating in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
To your work and to your career. And working with IGN and CNN for a lot of my reviews these days has been very good at revealing to me what I'm worth and what I'm able to do.
Yeah, touching on Nintendo. So I know the people at I think it's Golan, yeah, that handle a lot of the stuff for North America. I know Eddie. I know all these folks. I've never worked with Nintendo.
You don't work with Nintendo unless you are high up there. Like, I mean, they are very, very strict about a lot of that stuff.
And especially if you are a content creator, YouTube, who does a variety of other things, and if you in any way touch on emulation, Nintendo's like, nope, they're not going to work with you. And I learned that the hard way, because there were times with like the Steam Deck and handheld gaming PCs, I talked about emulation and such. And I actually, one of the people at Golan were like, we considered you to become part of the Nintendo partner program or what, a brand ambassador. But it's, you talked about emulation. So you're going to have to go a period of time without like talking about that. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Nah, I'm not going to talk about emulation. Because it's, one, if you have access to the internet, you can figure out the emulation on your own. And I know a lot of people like, oh, can you help me find ROMs and ISOs and all this other stuff? I'm like, the same question you're asking me, just type that into Google.
Yeah, right.
It is right there. Yeah, Nintendo doesn't fuck around. Square Enix definitely doesn't. So when I got the review code for 16, the amount of you can't say this, you can't show this, you can't talk about this, I was like, let me just show early footage. And I get reamed a lot of times by people on like especially on YouTube, because they're like, oh, you don't show the later in-game stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to spoil it either. Like, I want you to when we're writing reviews or we're doing videos, we're in a way we are doing marketing for these companies. So click on it, watch the video, read the article. We're going to give you as much without spoiling everything. And I feel like that this guy also segue into the next topic of your thoughts on clickbaiters, because that's a very prominent thing. I know that's become really to a point where people do more of that than actual decent YouTube videos or journalism nowadays. Why do you think that is?
I mean, honestly, it all boils down to the fact that one website is dictating how almost all of journalism functions now, and that being Google. You cannot, your publication can't survive without clicks anymore, unless you are a fully independently funded publication. If you are owned by a parent company and your site isn't getting views anymore, they're just going to start firing people, shutting things down, all that stuff. And I understand the sentiment around a lot of clickbait stuff, but I think a lot of it doesn't understand the reality of the situation, because generally speaking, like, there is clickbait, and like, don't get me wrong, that is an issue. But I think,
Yeah.
like spoilers, honestly, where there are a lot of times where people are more sensitive to the topic than what it actually is, right? They're not willing to see the forest for the trees. Where
Mhm.
you have an article that is not clickbait. It is very much, oh, this thing, but it's speaking in vague terms. Let's say it's about some kind of big news story that says this is blank, but it doesn't say what it is. And it's like, sure, that is clickbait and that it's baiting you to click, but it's not dishonest. It's not untrue, right? But then there are the dishonest and the false clickbait things, and that is something that I have a problem with. But I think it's like the there are times where people will read too much into something and maybe they'll expect something that isn't there. And granted, again, that does sometimes fall the journalist or the YouTuber or whoever, but like, really, I mean, if ultimately the article answers what's being said in the headline, if the video answers what's said in the thumbnail, I personally don't mind, because I know what it's like. I know the fact that like, you need to get a lot of clicks on your things to survive, to make a profit, to put food on the table, to keep a roof over your head. And so to that end, I think, again, like spoilers, people are sometimes a little bit oversensitive to things. Like I remember, to the spoiler conversation, I've seen people get up in arms about spoilers of things in the game that happen in the first half hour. And it's like, okay,
I've seen that too.
so much, like all the time. And it's like, what do you have to gain by like coming after somebody for talking about a story beat that you're going to experience in your first hour with the game, right?
Yeah.
Because at that point, you're not asking them to criticize, you're asking them to summarize. And that's another problem, is like onerous embargoes and spoiler culture and stuff like that make it difficult to sometimes properly and fully critique something.
Mhm.
And it's a delicate balance, because I'm with you. I don't want to spoil a cool story beat for someone, but things that restrict you from even talking about that in vague terms, I think, are always going to be a net negative for anything other than the anyone other than the company, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about AI and journalism at this point. I know that's a topic.
Oh, it's a topic, all right.
I'm letting
As
you
a,
drive.
well, as a teacher, I'm curious what you think about it.
So my perspective on it is, I view it as, it's, if you use it as like an assistant, for the sense of like, hey, this is the ideas I have in my head, can you help me structure them, or give me some type of like outline, I think that's fine. But when we're going and writing whole articles using AI, and yeah, that
It's bad.
it's really bad. And I know that people are developing things to be able to point out who is and isn't using AI, which is great, hold people accountable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know. I feel like AI, with where it is now from 2021 to now, has just jumped leaps and bounds. Everything's using it. And it's like, how do we find a way to use it properly that's not ethically, dishonest? Which,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with you. I think that there are, like, I don't know if I'm on the same page as like where I draw the boundaries for myself personally with AI and like
Mhm.
using it in the journalistic sense, but like, I don't know. My partner is an engineer, and like it, AI models are very useful for them to help run simulations and figure certain things out that would take them super long time to figure out otherwise. And I think like it's similar kinds of machine learning that do these things. And so I understand the broader applications of it outside of any kind of creative field. But once it starts getting into the creative space, I get really leery about AI touching anything in terms of content itself. I don't mind
Yeah.
when it's like, you know, like people use like Notion or Grammarly or whatever to like help plan things out and have like an AI assistant to help you figure out your schedule or like a
Yeah.
recording calendar or something like that. And that's fine. But even honestly, like for emails, like I can tell when an email's written with AI and it puts me off. Like I actively find that a little weird because then it's like, okay, am I talking to the human or am I talking to the AI, right? And
Yeah.
I know that I'm a bit of a boomer about AI in particular. Like I have a lot of friends and relatives who use AI for emails and stuff like that. And even that, I'm like, I would never do that because I don't know. There's for me, it's something that I can feel it. I can sense when I'm reading an email, and obviously that's going to change in 2 or 3 years when AI is even more advanced than it's already become. But for me, when I see something that's AI, I feel it and it feels weird and bad and kind of inhuman. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
And to me, if we continue at the rate that we're going, using AI to feed AI to feed AI is not a good pattern to be in, if that makes sense. Like to me, it kind of opens things up to just kind of uncreatively feeding into itself in
Mhm.
ways that will result in bad stuff for everybody, right? It will make movies and TV shows and games and books and music less interesting to enjoy because it's all just based on something else. And yes, I understand that all art is based on previously existing art to some degree, but not in that way. It is not synthesizing all art that exists. It is picking and choosing the things that you enjoy that you've experienced or heard and making it your own, right? And I think that's where the difference for me comes in.
And we've really gotten to this point now where, I mean, the conversation around AI as a whole, like, we're seeing how it's impacting voice actors, and we're seeing how it's
Yeah,
impacting artists. It's a tool, but the tool can never be as creative or original as we human beings. And I feel like
right.
there is I mean, because it fascinates me, but I also have to be like, all right, where do we draw the line on that? You know,
Hmm.
and like I know this other day with like, I was on Facebook. Yes, I still have a Facebook. People, majority of my family and people, like 90% of people in Hawaii are still on Facebook. They're like Twitter, no, or X or whatever. Blue Sky, what's that? It's yeah. Oh, for those of you who don't know, Hawaii is generally 10 years behind the rest of the world when it comes to like technological advances of like social media and stuff like that, or trends,
Hmm.
music. I remember when, I know I'm segueing, but I remember when like EDM first hit Hawaii, like
Uh-huh.
in the mainstream sense, and I'm like, it already hit the rest of the world well before. I'm like, yo, 2016, this is the only time we're in the EDM. That's been around for a bit. I'm just saying. But yeah, it's, I do have, like, I know when I did the I did a collaboration with Razer last year,
Hmm.
a couple times with their I think it's the Razer Cortex? No, Razer Axon. So they basically reached out to me, and we did a partnership with me covering the AI generative wallpaper software, the
Hmm.
Razer Axon, and I got paid for it, not
Hmm.
financially. I got products that I wanted, like the Razer Edge tablet and other stuff, which again, that's a form of payment. And you know, I actually use that stuff to basically create my own desktop wallpapers and such like that, and which is the context of which I showcased it being used. But I had people saying that I'm supporting AI replacing actual artists and people not paying them, and I'm like, no, this is a paid gig. I'm
Hmm.
doing a job.
Right.
But I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
but this is a paid gig. So
Yeah, I relate to that. I think like again, it's hard because you if everyone has to weigh their own decisions for that kind of thing against their own set of values, right? And like I remember I want to say a year or two ago at this point, IGN, for example, did an AI week, and I personally wasn't a fan, but I'm also not, like, I know that it's not always up to the people who are making the content for like whether or not that happens, because like it's a paid gig. Like sometimes you need those to keep the lights on, to be able to fund the reporting or the criticism or the anything else that your channel does or your publication does. And like, again, it's difficult to weigh in. For every single person, it's going to mean something different. Like I probably wouldn't do an AI thing if I didn't have to, right? But sometimes you do.
Yeah, definitely that. I want to ask you also about gaming events. Like I know there's a lot of criticism last year with the Game Awards and how that was handled. You were there in person, right?
Kind of. Yeah. So I sorry, what were you gonna ask?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I was kind of at the Game Awards. So I went last year, more honestly, like we talked about earlier, to do networking stuff, to hang out with people and see friends I hadn't seen since Summer Game Fest. And sorry.
No, you're fine. This is real life, people. See, we're not going to jump cut and edit this out. This is real people having conversations. So,
but yeah, I went basically just like see some friends, hang out, because I went. I also, like, an aside, I went to Columbia College Chicago, which is like very much a film school. I studied journalism, but a lot of my friends are in Hollywood, so most of my friends that I made in Chicago here have since moved to LA. And so whenever I go out there, I'm not just seeing industry folks, I'm seeing a bunch of my friends that I've been super close with for the last like 5-6 years, people that I've lived with and stuff like that. So so I was going out there with a couple of purposes in mind, but especially just to do networking and to do the damn thing, try and like get some kind of like in with something, which is usually how these events play out, is like they'll get you into places that you wouldn't normally be otherwise able to get into, which, again, the most important reason to go to these. Like, as much as I love the coverage, it's like meeting people is so important. So yeah, I went out there to do that, and I just didn't feel like paying $100 to get into the Game Awards. I've already been twice. One year I didn't pay, one year I did pay. And honestly, like, I don't I didn't feel the need to pay again, because I knew it would be a very long show. And my only other way in was to be a seat filler, and that was something that I'd considered. But like, to be a seat filler, you have to be there super early. You can't do this, and this. Like, you can't get up to go to the bathroom sometimes. Like, there's a lot of rules to it. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. So I actually hung out with our friend Kevin Kenson in my hotel room and just watched the show. And I also was able to get into the very prestigious, hard to get into Xbox mixer, basically just by asking really nicely. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to go to the Xbox mixer, have some snacks, some drinks on Microsoft, schmooze, booze, and then hang out with Kevin and watch the show from my hotel room. And that's exactly what I did. And I had a good time. I was very relaxed and got to kind of recharge before the busy night ahead, which always comes after the show. But yeah, sorry, that was a very long walk about not being at the Game Awards.
Well, do you feel like a lot of the criticisms towards the Game Awards last year, and actually the last several years, but I feel like the peak was last year. Do you think that's warranted, or do you, and also adding to that, I know this is a multifaceted question, but adding to that, do you feel like it's trying too hard to get the Hollywood attention or the mainstream attention than it is focusing on video games?
I think it's a yes on both counts, honestly. I think, you look at the second most recent Game Awards, and you see like Jeff Keighley talking about, in very vague terms, but he's still talking about making the industry a better place for women, or making a statement about the war in Ukraine, right? And then you look at that in comparison to the layoffs that happened this year, that happened last year, and the situation like going on in Palestine, and it's like, there are very clear parallels that you have mentioned in the past that you have used on your stage to kind of get a nice easy applause, but then when the time comes where saying something might actually mean something, it doesn't happen. And like that to me is one of the biggest issues, right? And he has such a big platform and he has all these eyes on him. I mean, he has more eyes on him than probably at this point every major sporting event combined, right? And it's like, I understand the need, like we discussed already, the need to fund your show and the need to keep the shareholders happy and everything, but that shouldn't necessarily come at the expense of the well-being of the people that you're making this money off of, right?
Yeah.
I think especially like his shows trade so heavily in big reveals of these really exciting, cool games, and a lot of them look really awesome. But then you look at the working conditions at these studios, or look at like how many of these studios have had layoffs, and it's like, oh, it's really concerning. I mean, just like last year, estimates put layoffs at over 10,000 people. That's an insane amount of people to lose their jobs, and then to have what is supposedly posited as the biggest show in video games, talking about like celebrating gaming. You can't do that if you're not also celebrating the people that make the games. And they talk about, the future class is kind of like a make good on that. And I don't think that that's really true. I mean, I don't know how much you've seen about this, but like being on the side of like knowing people in the future class and hearing people talk about that stuff and reading about it, it's like they don't do a lot to help these people out. They say they do, but it doesn't really sound like they're doing a whole lot aside from like, here, come to this show, we'll get you in for free to the Game Awards, and that's it basically, which to me again just comes back to what it seems like is posturing, really. And that to me I think goes for Jeff Keighley's kind of catering to the mainstream and trying to really court Hollywood and stuff like that. And that part I honestly understand a little bit more, because I think like when you're Jeff, like you are running a show that's supposed to be getting better every single year. You have people that are invested in this. You have people that are making money off of this aside from you. And so when you say, oh, this show is getting better every year, it is having more viewership every single year, just like I think every single year it's happened, it's gotten more and more viewership. And so having that viewership behind you is so important. And so I kind of understand it. I don't personally like it or encourage it, but I understand that that's kind of the thing that needs to be done to build up that external audience, to really put yourself a cut above every single other awards show, which is what he's trying to do.
100% I agree with everything you said with that. And I do feel like when you have these platforms and you have the eyes on you where you can make a statement that could impact industries as a whole, because people are looking at you, they're listening to you, and you choose not to, I think that's where a lot of people are falling short. I also think that's a lot of where the industry as a whole is falling short. When things come out, there's a very much a pick and choose about what we're actually going to talk about, what we're actually supporting, now we're seeing a lot of people coming out about crunch culture and how bad that is. But like for the longest time, mum's the word on that. People weren't really trying to talk about that, or talking about all the issues that were with Activision Blizzard. People knew and didn't really say anything about that. And that's not even a situation that's exclusive to Activision Blizzard. I mean, that's probably happening at other companies we like and probably don't even know about because it hasn't come to a head. It's just it's very interesting. Paralleling this to like a Dragon Infinite Wealth at Sega, like you set a game in Hawaii, you don't use any Hawaiian or Hawaii local celebrities, actors, voice actors, content creators, but you set the game there. You also don't, this is me putting Sega's feet to the fire, and I've talked to their PR about this as well. We had the fires in Lahaina last year.
Right.
You don't even, they didn't talk about that as far as we know publicly, and they didn't do any donations for it. Like, you're doing these collaborations, you bring in T-Pain, Drusky, XQC, all these people, but you could have taken a portion of what you're making off of this game, help the people that, you know, they're struggling from the fires. But that's, I get it, that's old news. Like, you could have even made a statement, hey, you know, they didn't do anything. And it's like, you have the platform, you have the capability of bringing attention to this. And just because things go out of the news cycle, which before news cycles, for those of y'all who don't know, they used to be weeks and months. Now it's like a couple hours, a day before it's forgotten. So it's, I don't know.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's kind of the whole part of the whole, like, it all comes back to kind of the instantaneous nature of information nowadays, where it's like people are able to get away with making a statement or making some kind of grandstandy take without actually leaning in or making it in a meaningful way. And that's consistent with so many industries, so many experiences, whether it's, you know, the fires in Lahaina or the layoffs that are happening today, or CEOs investing in NFTs when they shouldn't be, or crypto or Web3 or any of that kind of thing, where it's like, there was just a report that came out today from Rebecca Valentine in IGN, where she interviewed a bunch of developers, and so many of them were talking about how their CEOs are making these missteps, but then publicly talking about, but then you see them publicly talking about how they're going to correct things. Or I don't know if you saw this, but there was on Twitter the other day, there was a developer who had a thread that was making the rounds about how management and HR at Blizzard essentially gaslit him and lied to him about promotions and job offers and stuff like that. And it's like, that comes hot on the heels of your company's president saying that you are working on improving the culture there. And then this thing comes out years after. And it's like, what is actually being done, right? Are you doing something legitimately good, or are you protecting the company?
Yeah. You know, and oftentimes it's about their bottom line, unfortunately, as opposed to doing, you know, what is morally right, and by doing the right thing by the people who work there. And it's unfortunate. It's I feel like you and I could talk for hours at length about the industry as a whole. It's I guess I could say we both have a lot of gripes with the industry. There's a lot of areas where it definitely needs to improve, especially when it comes to just, you know, how can I get social media points of being on the right side by saying the right thing, but what I'm doing doesn't match up to what I'm saying. That needs to be fixed. Anything else you want to touch on with that?
No, not really. It's hard not to, like, the more I say about it, I feel like the more we're just gonna, like, really get into it. And it's like, I feel like the important stuff has been said, where it's just like, the nature of all of this kind of comes down to the capitalistic need for year-over-year growth that just isn't realistic, and it's damaging everyone except for the C-suite people.
It makes me concerned about the possibility of another video games crash. Like, I wasn't around for, was it the crash in 1983? I wasn't around for that. Wasn't born then. But, you know, looking at how it's like, we've got so many studios bought, closed, all these layoffs. How is this a sustainable market at this point? Like, it concerns me. You look at, I'm very critical of Square Enix. I love Square Enix, but I'm also critical of them. I look at the amount of games that they dropped from 2020 to now, and how many of them have had studios closed. There's like rumors right now about Octopath Travelers. Yeah, I think it's their studio being potentially bought by another company. Um, you look at games that they put out that they didn't support, or games that literally lasted less than a year. I mean, Final Fantasy, was it the first Soldier game, Babylon's Fall, Outriders now has a complete edition. I'm like, you only had one DLC, it is done. Like,
Right.
I feel like we're potentially heading towards a crash, because what is really the only thing that's going up is the budgets for these games.
Right.
And the people at the top are getting paid more. A lot of people aren't being paid what they're worth, which is the vast majority. And it's just, I don't understand from an economic standpoint how it's sustainable at all.
Yeah, I saw something. I forget if it was a tweet or an article or a part of an article, but there was something that essentially said something along the lines of the games industry as it functions now does not treat its employees well enough to have senior talent, or enough senior talent to go around. And then that trickles up to when you have like, there was some wild statistic. It was like 70% of all studios are working on service games. That's not the right number, but it is an overwhelming majority of studios that are working on live service games. And like, what that means and what defines a live service game remains to be seen in that context. But even if 2/3 of that large percentage are live service games in the sense that we think of, that's not good, right?
No.
And what you have,
not at all.
that's the kind of thing where the CEO says, I want to do this thing, and you have a bunch of senior management or senior people in development who are experienced. They might actually have something to say about it, whereas if you're just kind of fresh talent and you don't have the institutional knowledge and the lasting experience to say much about it, you might not be able to say much, or you might agree with them. And it's like, that's ultimately a judgment call. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's the kind of thing that we're missing out on. We need that knowledge of people who've been in the industry for a long time, not just to make money, but to make games, and to be able to influence the decisions from the people who are in the industry to make money.
Yeah. So I got 2 more topics I want to dive into with you, being completely respectful of your time.
Yeah, no worries. I've got like at least an hour and a half. So,
okay. So, what is your thought of this current console generation? We're having more remakes and remasters than actual new games. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it kind of reflects what we were just talking about, where, games take so long to make now that making a new game sometimes takes 7 or 8 years, and you can remake a game in 4.
Mm-hmm.
So then you release a game, work on the next game in that series. Let's say you have a remake of something from a different series that's from an IP that you own in between there. And then it looks like you're releasing a game every 4 years or something like that. That is not taking into account actual timelines for anything that I know. That's just kind of like a broad example. But taking that into account, I think something that I've heard some people say, and again, like, I am, relatively speaking, a very fresh face in the industry. I have connections, but not in the meaningful way that I would be able to weigh in on this with a ton of authority. But I can specifically say that, like, a lot of remakes happen because it is a publisher or developer training new hires on how to work on that franchise. So, like, the Dead Space remake, for example, that happened, I've heard some people say that, like, the kind of idea behind remaking Dead Space is that EA wants to train people how to make a Dead Space game. They want people to get really familiar with how the level design works, how the combat works, things like that are very important to that kind of game, or the environmental design or the sound design or what have you. And then learn how to make a new Dead Space game by remaking an old one, where you get familiar with the ethos and you familiarize yourself with a lot of the parts, the nitty-gritty stuff that are, like, involved in the production of one of those games. So I think that's part of it, honestly, is there are a lot of people who worked on these games 10, 15 years ago that have gone off to start their own studios, or they've been hit in a different wave of layoffs, or they've pivoted into different industries, or they've started their own studios, and now studios are maybe having to start back up from square one. And also, I think part of it is that nostalgia is really powerful and really easy to monetize. I mean, I really I really think it's a positive and a negative that we have such intense fandoms on the internet, because like fandom and nostalgia is so easy to weaponize. I mean, look at Pokemon. I love Pokemon.
Man. Yeah.
I think Violet and Violet as games are not very functional, but they are some of the best Pokemon games, like core Pokemon games, in a very long time, because they are very well made or very well designed, but they're not necessarily well made. They don't work
Mhm.
very well. They don't look very good, you know. But the gameplay is good and the writing is good and better than it has been in a long time. And it's like reconciling that as a fan is tough to do, because like then you see IGN give Scarlet and Violet a 6, and you have people being really weird about it and really shitty to the reviewer for that game, whereas like that's a warranted score because that game is barely functional on Switch. It is not good in that way, and like there's no other art form or medium. I guess kind of aside from movies now, but like there's no other art form or medium where like you get a book and it just doesn't work. Imagine trying to turn the page of a book and it just doesn't turn, right? Like that's the equivalent of a video game not working. And obviously, like that's oversimplifying it quite a bit. Like there is a lot of hard work that goes into making sure that these video games work, but when they don't, it's fine to give it a bad score if that's like how you feel about it. And I think fandom kind of feeds into this idea that like unless it is a very specific version of this thing, it is not good.
Man, fandoms really don't even like, they get so up in arms over reviews.
Yeah.
And I feel like people need to understand a review is just somebody's opinion.
Yeah.
A 6 or 7 to the reviewer could be an 8, 9, or a 10 to you, or it could be a 1, 2, or 3, or a 0.
Right.
It's
Yeah, man.
it's perspective, and people get so angry over somebody's like
Mhm.
opinion. It's like, okay,
Dude.
you don't like it, go out, play the game, and write your own review. Do your own
Yeah.
video.
Literally. It's so funny too, because like it to me strikes the same balance as like fandom responding to reviews as it does fandom responding to actual things in like in that series or whatever, where it's like you are you aren't letting the creative person do the creative thing. You are letting the creative person, you are trying to get the creative person to do the thing that you want. Whereas I feel like a lot of the best work, especially in long running franchises, is when we get something that we don't think of, or something that is like we wouldn't have made. I mean, like as controversial as it is, like look at a movie like The Last Jedi, which drew a lot of heat from a lot of people, but also like it did something really new and creative with it, and that brought a lot of conversation to it. And like you can dislike that, and I'm not going to shit on you for disliking it, but I will say like it encourages engagement, right? It is something that you are given something that you didn't know you had, didn't know you wanted, didn't know could happen. And even if you don't like that, that's far more interesting than just getting exactly what you want because your 4-hour prediction video about lore or something on YouTube has like a lot of views. You know what I mean? It's like, that's cool. I'm glad you're passionate, but like, just because you don't get exactly what you want doesn't give you the right to like make everyone else's life a living hell. It's the same thing with like shipping. You know, I think shipping is like cool and
Talk
fine.
to him.
I'm glad people ship certain things with certain characters, but like the ways that people will respond to like criticisms of a ship or criticisms of a certain character dynamic in a game or a movie or a TV show is absurd, and it's almost never warranted.
As an example of like an extreme thing with a fandom just losing their mind to the point of attacking the person who's portraying the character.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's, you know, we could easily say Laura Bailey from who did Abby in The Last of Us Part 2, but I could go so far back as like Breaking Bad, the lady who played
Yeah.
Heisenberg's wife.
Or I mean, look at Resident Evil 4 remake. The actress who played Ada.
Ada, yeah.
I mean, she was thoroughly harassed. Didn't she like quit voice acting because of it? I mean, it was like something
Yeah.
really extreme, or it
It
was
was
like social
bad,
media,
yeah.
but it was like completely unwarranted just because people had this over sexified version of Ada Wong in their heads from a game that has aged very well gameplay wise, but maybe not always narratively, if that makes sense. And like reworking that character into something better, I think it is a net positive.
Yeah, they went heavily at her, saying like she wasn't as good as the woman who did the voice of Ada in RE2 remake. But as someone who, I mean, yeah, I have a lot of friends that are voice actors. I'm friends with Leon from RE2 and RE4 remake. But I'll be honest, like listening to Ada and RE2 remake and then going to RE4, I'm like, it
Cool. Yeah.
it it didn't do that crazy of a difference for me. It's like people who got mad at Young Ya for like his take on Kiryu because they replaced the original guy who voiced it. I'll admit, hearing Young Ya in his videos versus him doing VO, they're very different. So I can understand if you don't watch stuff that he does his work in. I touched upon that in my Infinite Wealth review. But like, if you're just used to him on YouTube videos sounding monotone and whatever, that's just how he talks. But when he's doing voice acting, he doesn't sound the way he talks. And I feel like the narrative and the drama around him being Kiryu was, yeah, yeah, fandoms can be great, but they can suck.
Yeah.
Suck. One of the things I wanted to touch on is I'm trying to unpack this because it could be a little loaded. People, you see the contrarian commentators on social media, you see them on YouTube, the ones who have this agenda against games journalists.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on those people? You can be as honest as you want.
I'll try to be as honest as I want without kicking the bee's nest. I think that those people should like really like ask themselves what they're actually saying. I think it's the same with any contrarian about anything, right? It's like ask yourself if what you're saying is based on what you perceive or what you're told. Right, I feel like a lot of the perception about games journalists is a from the general audience that are generally like not fans of us, comes from this place of like, oh, they don't know how to play games, they don't actually like the games, they don't whatever, and it's like a lot of these criticisms aren't true, but they will assume that they're true for any reason other than just like taking something at face value, not looking into it, not, let's say, reading a headline but not an article, reading a review score and the verdict but not the full review. Like I reviewed the most recent Naruto game, Naruto Boruto Ninja Storm Connections, which is one hell of a title, by the way. I reviewed that for IGN, and to avoid getting super lingo-y, because I'm a huge Naruto fan, I've watched the original series I think 3 times at this point. I love the show, I love the characters, and I know how it works. Like I get the vocabulary, and I said that the characters in the game were able to use magical techniques instead of jutsu, and people lit my ass up for that. They were not happy. They were not happy about that at all. And I'm like, they were all like, oh, like dude doesn't know Naruto, he doesn't watch the show, he hasn't read it, whatever. And like, I'm not going to go into the comments and be like, I literally said in my review this, or you can check my credentials on this or this. But like, a lot of the time it's people who latch on to one very minute thing and extrapolate it out, because again, it comes down to a lot of the times like toxic fandom. Like I think a lot of the discussion around Suicide Squad is a great example. And again, coming back to IGN, like people assumed that IGN had some kind of like hate for this game, when it's like no more than like anyone else who was covering the game was like saying, oh, it doesn't look very good, whatever. And people got really up in arms about like when IGN published the review, things that they wrote about it, stuff like that. And it's like, you aren't really perceiving you aren't really engaging with the work. You are taking it at very face level, and you are using talking points from people who have no idea what's going on and applying it to what is happening. And that's always going to be bad, no matter what you're talking about. Taking things that people are telling you what's going on that don't have any bearing on the thing, and then putting it into your opinion or using it to form your opinion is never going to be good. And really, I think that's what it comes down to, is like, I get why people do not like games journalists for whatever reason. For some reasons, those are valid, and some they're not. And like, I'm not going to say that they're wrong to do so, because ultimately I can't control whether or not you like me, whether or not you like my work, whatever. But I can say that chances are, if you're a contrarian about it, you aren't actually reading the work, you aren't actually engaging with the content, you are having a negative experience with it because you are not letting yourself do anything else. I don't really know how to put it well, because again, like, I'm pretty new to it, and like only recently have I started getting like people in the comments of my tweets and stuff like that being weird about me tweeting certain things, but I'm also not going to act like I haven't experienced that kind of thing before.
Yeah, I would say like the biggest thing with the contrarian people is a lot of them are just going out of their way to find something to be upset about. And I had to tell because I got 2 teenage daughters. I may not look it, but yes, I have 2 teenagers. I had to talk to them recently about people and opinions, and you know how everyone's not gonna always agree with you, but if it's your opinion, especially when it comes to like, they're trying to get into like journalism and content creating and such. Like, if this is how you feel about it, stand on it. But at the same time, you're always going to have that person that's going to try and be like, actually come at you different ways because they don't agree with you. And they're going to feel like they are entitled to say what they want to say. You know, of course, have your opinion. That's fine. Your opinion is not going to always matter. Like, if I'm telling you in my review why I don't like something, and you're trying to tell me, well, this is why I'm wrong, you're already invalidating yourself, because the review is about my perspective, my opinion on said thing. You know, like this like, as an example, the PlayStation Portal. I love the thing. I have it right here. If I can get it off this. Oh crap. I have it right here. I love it. I use it. I use it every day. A lot of people tell me that I'm paid by Sony, I'm a shill, there's no point in it, just use your phone and a backbone controller. And I'm over here like, as a parent, I've got a toddler, I've got teenagers. My phone has to always be open. Right. If I got to take a call from the wife, or the kids need to go to the doctor, or we need to go do something, you know, somebody got in trouble at school, I need to have my phone. But when if I got my toddler on me and she's sleeping, I got the Portal, Badanamu, whatever, Coco Melon, whatever's playing on TV, Bluey preferably. Then I can just sit there and play my PlayStation 5. A lot of people, they have this opinion that, especially when it comes to like remote play devices or mobile gaming, that just because they don't like it, everyone does it. And you know, being unable to step outside of your own viewpoint. I think I see more of that as a journalist and content creator than anything else. Like, I've had people, I think I did a short years ago talking about, we won't no, you're not going to see Halo on PlayStation 5. Let it go. They're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like 2021. I have people to this day, like, this aged well. Halo's clearly going to it. I'm like, where was the official announcement? Whoa, all the rumors. Okay,
Oh my God.
yeah, that's the rumor. What is actually factually there? Well,
Right.
It doesn't matter because the rumor. Like, no. What's the actual facts?
Yeah, man, that's especially relevant today. Like, the whole Xbox thing is just a really good example of all the things we've talked about, I feel like.
How do you feel like, because I'm sure you see the vitriol that's going around. Like, it got to a point where I'm like, I had to mute Xbox as a word. It's just, people are losing their minds, bro.
They really are, man. It's frustrating because, like, I get why people are mad. Like, I'm sure you've seen the viewpoints of, like, what happens if the digital libraries start disappearing, or if this service stops existing, or what have you. And, like, I understand the trepidation and fear for that, because, like, for a lot of people, $300-$500 is an insane investment, and, like, buying into that ecosystem only to find out that it's not going to carry through for much longer is really potentially frustrating. But that's not what the report said. The report said that some things might be headed there at some point. And it's like, that is potentially very big. And, like, the discussion around that and the speculation around that is very interesting. And I'm very fascinated by what everybody has to say about, what happens if this game goes to this platform. But also, like, at the end of the day, I don't understand how, again, beyond the ecosystem, beyond the hardware, and beyond your library potentially disappearing, how this genuinely affects you or anyone.
Right? Like, these people are taking it so personally.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to tell them, and I know I get in trouble for telling people this all the time in my comment section, on Twitter, wherever. Go outside, touch some damn grass. Go touch some damn grass.
Yeah, man.
It's not that serious. Like, do you have stock in this company? Like, to me, with all, like, regardless of if I'm playing on PlayStation or Switch or Xbox or PC, it's a matter of what piece of plastic controller do I want to pick up and what button layout, analog stick layout. It doesn't really matter. And the biggest thing with this whole thing that I don't understand when it comes to the Xbox situation is, have you not been paying attention to Microsoft as a whole, their business, like how they've been doing things? And this is, for those who may be old enough to remember, and this is the example I use. I used to work for Microsoft. Look at Microsoft Office. For the longest time, that was Windows exclusive.
Yeah.
You couldn't, if you had a Mac, you couldn't get it. And then eventually they put it on Mac and it was shitty. There was no parity between the Windows and the Mac version. And then eventually, when Satya Nadella came into power, when he got there and he started running things, why are we making different versions of stuff for different platforms? Here we go. Let's put Office on here. Let's put Office 365. It runs the same whether you're using Mac, PC, Chromebook, Linux. It doesn't matter. There's parity across the board. Microsoft has been showcasing for the last 15 years that they care more about having their services available everywhere as opposed to just platform specific. Xbox is no exception.
No.
You can play games, Xbox games, on PC, on your mobile device. Doesn't matter. Some smart TVs.
Pretty sure
Samsung.
you do them on VR headsets now, too.
Right? Yeah. Like, Am I shocked if Microsoft goes fully third party? No. But at the same time, the Xbox brand isn't going to die off. They're not going to kill it off. They spent too much money buying these studios. So it's like, I wonder where is the logic just escaping people?
Yeah, it
just
feels like
seems
people have just this short ass memory that they're like, oh yeah, Microsoft just spent 70 billion or however much money it was on buying Activision Blizzard King. They're now, right now, like not even half it, not even with the ink dry, not even half a year later, they're suddenly going to start just like stop existing. It doesn't make sense. There is no sense to that line of thought to me.
it is not. It is not at all. The last topic I wanna touch on with you is what are your thoughts on these industry leaks that we've been seeing happen so much over the last couple of years, especially with what happened with Microsoft? Um, do you think that's going to impact us as journalists and content creators and being able to work with companies going forward with so much stuff constantly being leaked? I feel like they're gonna batten down the hatches to start preventing stuff like that.
Yes and no. I think it's tough because when you're operating at such a high level with so
Mm-hmm.
many people, with so many studios, with so many things happening, with so many moving pieces, for a studio, for like a company like Microsoft, there's nothing that they can do to control the leaks. And really, I think to make things more difficult for content creators and journalists is not a position that they're in right now. I think if I were Microsoft personally, I would not want to do anything that could potentially put me on someone's bad side. And not to say that being on a journalist's bad side is going to automatically get you bad coverage, but it is definitely going to make people less willing to kind of tiptoe around things. Like, for example, I know that this is something that I've heard talked about before on other podcasts and other situations, but like people knew about Blade before it was revealed at the Game
Mm-hmm.
Awards. I knew about it, and I know a handful of other people who knew about it. We knew it was Arcane Studios' next game. We knew it was Blade, and a couple other things alongside that. And like that's something that I'm not going to report on because there's nothing that I really gain from that. Right? There's nothing like that. And I think the culture of covering leaks I think does depend a lot on what the leak is, what it's about. Is it actual news or is it just, oh, this studio is making this game and it's coming out this date? If that's all it is, then unless there's like an actual leak where there is information that's hard data, like the Nvidia leak is a great example of a leak that's actually worth reporting on. But if you just know about a game and you know who's making it, it's like, what good does that do you? You know? But to me, I think there's no reason why that should affect people's relationships with companies. And ultimately, if it does, that, especially as journalists, that falls then on our editors and our publications to kind of take care of us, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's say I publish a news story that's not flattering about Nintendo or whoever, and they find out that I'm reviewing their next game for whatever publication, and they're not willing to give it to the publication because they know I'm reviewing it. That then is no longer about the journalism. That is about Nintendo trying to control the narrative, right? And that is part of their job. They're technically well within their right, but they're also missing out on something when they do that. And to me, the scary thing is that there are people who are getting punished for doing their jobs by these companies that are changing what they're willing to publicize and stuff like that. But I don't think it should.
Okay. All right. So, with that being said, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we go?
Sorry, I think you froze there for a little bit.
Oh, it froze. You there? Oh no, you're good. With that being said, is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we go?
Um, Yeah.
I don't know. It froze again
Is
on
it
my
my
end.
end?
See, this is gonna force me to go back to StreamYard because I never had it. I think it's just their
Oh, okay.
servers. I think it's Talk Studio servers.
Yeah. Am I still freezing?
Somewhat. It's like skipping.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. So sorry, I actually didn't catch what you were asking me either time that you said it.
Oh, okay. So the question I had was like, is there anything you want to leave the audience with before you go? Like any advice for anyone who's looking to get into journalism or may want to go down the path that you went? Anything. Floor is yours. Anything you want to promote
I think, firstly, I think my biggest piece of advice is be stupid, but don't be stupid. this is something that I say to a lot of people who ask me about this. Is like, you have to have the committed, like dogmatic bravery-ish. Like, it's not bravery, but it is the same kind of foolhardiness, that comes with it, where it's like you believe in yourself and you believe in your craft and you believe in your ability to make the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the most important thing, right? Is you have to have that fire within you to like say, hey, I know I'm going to be able to do this. I know it might be hard, but I can do it. So that's part of it. But also the don't be stupid is that, like, don't be dumb about what you're doing. I have a lot of friends, like, sorry, having gone to art school, like, I have a lot of friends who are very unwilling to work a bartending job or a retail job or work odd jobs to kind of help fund things as they're making their way in. And like, I'm not even 2 years out of college. I'm still working at a bar. I have always pretty much worked in the service industry ever since I've been in content creation or journalism. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you should probably always have something like that, because especially if you're freelance, things can be really feast or famine. Gigs can come and go very suddenly. I mean, at the end of 2020, up until September, I was making a lot of money from one single gig at Android Central, and that was paying my rent. It was buying my groceries. It was paying for my utilities, everything. And they completely cut their freelance budget, and suddenly I was without a job, right? So things like that, especially with freelance, putting all your eggs in one basket is never the way to go. Always have a few contacts, a few irons in the fire, and like, it's a grind. It's an ass kicking. Like, I will not be the first, and I will certainly not be the last to tell you that, like, this line of work as a freelancer is all about self-motivation. It is all about self-management, and that is the most important thing. And I'm not very good at that, but I use the tools that I need to, and to get myself where I need to be. And I'm sure you can attest to this too, Mekel, where it's like, you need to be on top of yourself and you cannot let up, because the moment you do, like, it's when you fall out of the pattern. And when you fall out of the pattern, then you stop making money, and then you're shit out of luck, and you have to start from square one sometimes.
That's God, that's so true.
It hurts.
It does. My God. He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna take a week off. That could be a death sentence to your career.
For real.
Other than that, is there anything you're working on? Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, absolutely. So when is this episode probably going to come out?
We're gonna shoot for this to come out. Okay, my mouse died. Let me switch to the other one. I'm shooting to drop this episode on the 26th.
26th. Okay, so by then, my review of Foam Stars for IGN will be out. Please go check that out.
Love the game.
It's very fun, but everything except for the gameplay drives me insane.
Same here.
Those menus, man. Those menus are so slow, and there's no rematch button. You got to go in and out and in and out. But I like the gameplay quite a bit. But aside from that, as we talked about briefly, I checked out Ultros for PC Games N. It's hard to say what'll be coming out here and there, but stay tuned to my social channels. That's CHAS_MKE. That's Chaz Milwaukee on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much everywhere except for Blue Sky. On Blue Sky, I am Don't Feed the Charlie, but I'm not very active on Blue Sky. But yeah, those are the places you can find me. If you're curious about my work, if you have any questions, seriously reach out. I'm always happy to talk shop with people. Sometimes I might not be very quick to respond because, like I said, this shit is very, very brutal, and sometimes you are behind the 8 ball for like 4 things at once, and you have to stay up all night. So like that's just how it is sometimes.
Oh yeah, that's so true. For those who are listening or watching, links to all of Charlie's stuff will be in the description below. So make sure you give him a follow on social media. Man, Blue Sky, as much as that was hyped up, I'm on it, and I'm like, people are not that active. As much as we keep wanting an alternative to X or Twitter, nothing, even Threads. Like, I'll be honest, Threads is just like it feels like an extension of Instagram, where it's just mostly, at least what I see in my this could be what I look at. Okay, sometimes I see big booby girls. I'm like, ooh, like who don't kill me. You know, sometimes I see that, but like I don't see a lot of people going to these platforms in droves like folks are saying, like, oh, we're gonna leave X. And we have every right to want to leave it, but that's still,
it's all about it's the functionality, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's like for Threads, you can't DM someone on Threads, you have to go back to Instagram. Right?
Like,
isn't that how it works? And then with Blue Sky, it's like it just doesn't have the like scale or functionality that Twitter has. So it's like justifying using that over Twitter right now, because like for personal use, I get it. Like if I were just using Twitter for following my favorite creators, I would probably be more active on Blue Sky instead of Twitter. But like we use Twitter for work, right? We see how and where certain things happen in the industry through Twitter. It is a news source that is very valuable, but it's also a networking tool that's very valuable in a way that no other app is really able to function as for our purposes. So it's like it's hard to justify.
Yeah, it really is. hopefully one day there will be a legitimate viable competitor to X, but right now
would be nice.
Getting off of, like, I take social media breaks, so if I'm ever slow to respond or if I don't, it's just because I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I need to get off of this for a bit, especially with the Xbox stuff. And
oh my god,
I forgot that is something else, and I'm just like, oh my god, I can't, I just need to get off of it. But yeah, I hope we do have and know people. Facebook is not Facebook, not Threads either. Threads needs more. If Threads had more functionality, yes.
Well, Threads also, like they've said as much, that like Threads is supposed to be for social stuff and not as much a replacement for Twitter's like news networking kind of thing, the way that it works currently. And it's like, okay, so you're not gonna ever beat Twitter then.
And the same thing with like Mastodon. I know people were talking about that, and that was a hellacious nightmare setting that up. And then people don't really use that either. So it's like, all right, this is where we are. But that could be another episode. That unfortunately won't be this one. We're going to end this on a high note. So thank y'all for coming through, for listening, for watching. If you have any questions for myself or for Charlie, feel free to reach out to us on social media platforms. And other than that, make sure you check out Charlie's work, follow him, and show some love, show some support to one of the best journalists out there. I will definitely say, I love your work, man.
Thank you.
With that being said, man, thank you for coming on the show. I know we've been trying to get this going for a bit, and I'm sorry because having kids, dude, I'm like, wait, today is Monday. Like when you messaged me, you're like, we're still on. I was like, yeah. I was like, oh shit, it's Monday. God, and I looked at my kids. I'm like, you little energy vampires. I swear to God.
That's how it goes, man.
So But yeah, man, thank you again for coming on the show. And yeah, definitely need to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a pleasure, Mekel. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course. And with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay safe, be blessed, have aloha, and we'll see you on the next one. Hui ho.
For your time, for listening to this episode of the Kasanova podcast, number one podcast in Hawaii. If you found this episode to be incredibly enjoyable, informative, or if there's anything you gain from it, or any insight, or anything that's good that you really, really enjoyed, make sure whatever platform you're listening to it on, or if you're watching it, leave a comment if that's available on the platform, like it, share it around with someone you think would enjoy it, and give us some feedback, because your feedback is exactly what we need to keep this show going. And if you're wondering what are some ways that you could support the show, we got various ways. We've got Patreon, we have channel memberships over on YouTube, as well as Subscribestar, Coffee, and so much more. Links for everything will be in the description of the podcast, so make sure you go check that out. And with all that being said, I hope you have an aloha rest of your day.
Let them know that I'm next level. I'm a whole new kind of guy. Yeah. Yes, at the top spot in case you forgot. We the ones that got the block hot, bullet got the shot.